Okay. So again, hello everyone. Welcome to our Career Insights panel. My name is Cheryl Canales. I'm an advisor and program coordinator at Beyond Barnard. And I am so excited to be moderating. This is our third Career Insights panel for the semester. And it's really exciting to see students around campus and really get the energy up during these programs. So really excited to have you all here. Soon we're going to get into the panel. Again, we're going to be talking about marketing and communication. So we were fortunate enough to have 4 alumna joining us today, all from within the industry and field, and they have a lot of experience and knowledge to share with you all. So we're really excited to have you all here. Thank you again in advance. Also, just to remind you, if you have not made an appointment at Beyond Barnard, or have you have not visited us at all this semester, please feel free to do that. We can help with anything from grad school advising, anything career services related, and as well as Barnard specific jobs on campus. So please check out our website. We also have our peer career advisors, who are the students that I supervise personally, and they are also able to offer appointments in person, which is also really, really great. We're excited to have them back as well. So be sure to do that if you haven't already, and we'll get right into it. So I'm going to kick us off with some introductions. So we're going to ask our alumna to introduce yourself and talk about what you do currently in your role, where you are working, and how you got there. So Maddie, if you don't mind starting us off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Maddie, BC15. I currently oversee communications at TCG Player, which is a niche technology company that owns a marketplace for collectible card games like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. I do everything from product marketing to executive communications, government affairs, media relations, corporate positioning, and brand strategy. So how did I get here? Well, I started my career in government, working ultimately as a press secretary in economic development for the state of New York. It was a great experience and it gave me exposure to public affairs, public-private partnerships. But probably like some people here, I actually took a step back after the 2016 election, and I used it as an opportunity to reevaluate what I wanted out of my career. And instead of going to business school or law school, like many of my peers at the time, I landed at a strategic communications firm called Joel Frank. And every day was like a crash course in business school. So while at Joel Frank, I worked across a variety of practice areas with a focus on financial communications and investor relations. I became an expert at M&A and transaction communications, crisis and reputation management, corporate communications, executive change management, and shareholder activism, which is simply when a big investor who owns a large share of your company wants to agitate for change or oust your CEO or something fun like that. So not high pressure at all. But to contextualize it for you, I represented companies like WeWork following its failed IPO and subsequent financing package of SoftBank. I did McDonald's CEO change and the really fun sexual harassment that came out of that. I represented MGM following the Las Vegas mass shooting and helped with the resulting litigation. And I defended HP against a hostile takeover bid from Xerox. I also worked on some less high profile accounts, which is actually how I landed at TCG Player. And I landed here in July. They were a client seeking corporate and brand positioning counsel. And I loved the company and its core values so much that I quit my job to join them full time. To be clear, I awkwardly asked the CEO and CMO for a job. The CMO, who is currently my boss, made a position for me almost on the spot. So my biggest takeaway from my background is if you want quick and dirty experience, you should join a startup or an immature tech company. TCG Player has been around for a while in different iterations, but we're still pre-Series B. So I say the word immature with love. It's really a happy marriage of all my disparate skills and experiences.
Thank you so much, Maddie. That was so interesting to hear. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about kind of like the marriage of everything that you've done and how you ended up here. That's incredible. And you'll find common stories from a lot of different alumna, which I really appreciate coming to Barnard College. So thank you.
I hope someone has Pokemon in their background too.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so. It's classic. Marie.
Hey guys, I do not have Pokemon in my background, but I do have two boys who are actually two boys and a girl who are Pokemon fiends. So you would be the star of our household if you were coming to visit. They love Pokemon. Sorry guys, I'm also getting over a cold of some sort, so I apologize ahead of time for my voice. So I'm Marie Kwashi Dauphin. This is my married name. When I was BC, I graduated in 2002. I was Marie Kwashi. I too, I'm in the corporate communications and marketing space. I started out my career really not knowing what corporate communications was. I basically went to school thinking I'm going to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. This is a first generation immigrant story, I think, for many of us. So it was a bit of discovery, self-discovery for me. I first started actually in fundraising for the University of Chicago after I graduated, and ended up really liking that, but especially looking at the communication side and having a knack for it. I then decided to do public-private partnerships, so working with brands like Quaker and T-Mobile to do community sponsorships. So it really brought my love of community activism along with communications. I decided to do my MBA and did marketing and sustainability. And those two really kind of brought me to where I am today, where I would say I'm a storyteller. I work with different brands to tell stories that inspire change. I really enjoy what I do. It's not a job that I thought existed when I was an undergrad. So I think if there's one thing that I've learned from my experience is take your passion seriously, and you follow through with them, because somewhere in all the mix it'll start to make sense.
Thank you so much, Marie. Isabel?
Hi, everyone. So I am a BC 18 graduate, and I am a lot newer to this field than I think Maddie and Marie are. I'm currently the Media and Program Development Specialist or coordinator at the Queen Sofia Spanish Institute, which is a nonprofit, very small nonprofit that aims to increase Americans' appreciation, understanding of the Spanish-speaking world. And as a Spanish major at Barnard, I was really, that was kind of my mission in school. And I took that to the Hispanic Society of America Museum, where I interned during my time at Barnard, and really channeled that into education there, and was giving tours and creating lesson plans, which then led me to start teaching Spanish at a private immersion school in New York. And then I've been here for about a year. So within my role, I both do marketing and communications for the Institute, but I also am involved, since it is a very small organization, in the programming that we do. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. I have one other colleague who helps me with all of that, but it's from the beginning of the event, we advertise and communicate all of that, and then run it as well. So yeah, again, much smaller than a lot of other organizations, but a nice, I guess, introduction to what a nonprofit marketing job might look like. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So I graduated class of 2008. So my course of study was, I think, similarly sort of or I should say my pathway was also unexpected. I was laughing when Marie, you were saying like you didn't even know that the job that you are in now existed. It was similar for me. I studied psychology and music. Psychology because I was interested in it, and music because I absolutely loved it. And I wasn't sure, I only knew that in music, there were performers and there were PhDs in like historical musicology. So I thought my only options there were to be a professor or a professional singer. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to do either one of those. And on the psychology end, I was really, really interested in neuroscience and also in abnormal psychology. So like, going into the clinic and working with patients with different disorders. So after Barnard, I started working at the Mount Sinai Eating and Weight Disorders program. And I worked as a clinic coordinator there and a research assistant for 4 years. I thought I was going to go get a PhD in psychology, and my third year there, I kind of decided to go get a master's in music, and so I ended up there. I didn't know what I was doing, but along the way, as part of the program, I was at Hunter College, where they have a new American opera program, and I love creative people. Like I absolutely love people who can make things, artists. Composers, mathematicians, like anyone who can create anything is great in my book. So I started working with these young, exciting, young American composers, and they were super talented. And I just thought, my gosh, like I want to help bring these works to life. Like that's what I want to do. So I didn't know if that was a career thing, but I started working for their opera company, and I stayed there actually for several years, even as I had my first child and then my second child, and I kept working with the company, and we built it up to this wonderful workshop program where different departments would work together. So there would be a creative writing department would write the libretti for new operas, which is like the book for the operas, and then the composers would write it, and then the performers would perform it with the orchestra and staging. And of course, with a small company, as Isabel was saying, you sort of get your hands into everything. So I was helping to produce and helping to choose repertoire. And sometimes I'd go in there and I'd even sing through the first round because they needed someone to do that, or picking up props and putting things away, and the whole thing. And of course, as part of that, I started writing press releases and coordinating with different publicity outlets, both online and in print, and figured out what a communications office was and how to send things at the right time and get the right tone. So that was all kind of learned on the job. I would say actually the psych training was really great, because in a sort of unexpected way, because when you're dealing with very high stress positions, and Maddie, my goodness, you've been in some very high stress positions. Same thing in a clinical setting, you sort of learn how to temper your emotions a lot, which was really helpful, and how to sort of strike the tone of being calm and being in control, which is something that I think, is not necessarily taught in a classroom. You're taught a lot of facts and information, but this sort of living experience where you have to go in and manage a situation and you don't quite know what's going on, that's the sort of thing. So that was really helpful in coming into a world where you've got so many moving parts. So fast forward a little bit later, I was looking to go back into full-time work. I was doing the opera thing part-time. And I came across my current position now. So I work at this company called SHOT / European American Music. So SCHOTT is a publishing house that was founded in 1770, which is the year that Beethoven was born. It's a German publishing house, and we publish classical music from, we have medieval stuff on our repertoire all the way through, composers living in the present day. We sign new composers all the time. And I've found my dream job of working with living composers to help bring their music to life. So what I do is I work, on the sort of standard things like press releases and newsletters and e-blasts and all sorts of things like that. But also I work with organizations like opera companies and symphonies and small chamber ensembles, individual artists, to get people the repertoire that they need and to introduce them to new composers that we have in our roster, to get new commissioning opportunities, because of course opera companies, orchestras, they always want to commission new music as well, and to kind of just bring these new works to life. So that's a lot of what I do. And I think, like the other ladies on the panel, you know, it wasn't such a straightforward thing. I think communications crosses so many fields, and so many of the experiences that you have in a variety of fields, whether they're, you know, like Spanish, a very important part of what you're doing, Isabel, or Maddie, and your experiences in government, and Marie, you know, it's you take what you've already learned and then kind of just bring it into this new field and figure out, you know, from there what you're going to be doing. So yeah, that's kind of the background.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And I think you summarized that beautifully. And it really resonated with me. And you're like, I don't know what I'm at that time. I did not know what I was doing. And I think it is a normal and common thing, especially when you're entering the professional field, whether it be for the first time or you're switching industries or fields. There's always a learning curve a little bit. And I think that's kind of comforting just to know that, like, hey, no matter where you're at, there's going to be some learning involved. So I appreciate that. So our next question that we have for our panelists is, what are some of the key skills or competencies that you find are essential to your field based on your own experiences? And we're going to start back up with Maddie again.
Sure. I think that a lot of us kind of touched on this, but I think soft skills are really underrated. And I think they're a key differentiator, not just in communications and marketing, but for young professionals generally. In my opinion, being a clear and concise writer and communicator will get you far. But I think that being creative, strategic, and a good self-advocate is equally as important. I realize this is vague, but it's why I'm so excited about my own marketing future. At some point in the last 5 years, I feel like the playbook got thrown out the window. Like, there's certainly value in experience and also learning 20-plus-year-old tried and true frameworks. But there's a real need across the industry to innovate. And more specifically, I think this means that there's so much potential for you if you're young in this field. There's been a reckoning, even among some of the more like old school companies, firms, and agencies. And what it has led to is this notion that good ideas come from everywhere. So you should listen to your junior talent and you should treat them well. So being a technical person and having a hard skill set is certainly valuable. But I've made it really far in my career in a short amount of time by being creative and strategic and resourceful. And I really believe that scrappiness can't really be taught on the job, but it can be mastered. So that's kind of my little pitch and what I think gets you far. It's really soft skills go a long way. So always bet on yourself and believe that.
Thank you, Maddie. Marie?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to second that. Being scrappy is very underrated. And it's probably one of the things that I would definitely point to in my experience. And also being resilient. As someone who I graduated in 2002. So when I was coming out of school, gosh, it was either a recession was about to happen or it just happened. In any case, it's really about weathering change, really, and knowing that change is a constant. So when I have gone through, when I've had the opportunity to work for organizations, I always kind of think about what can I take from here that's gonna make me a better person, a better marketer, a better communicator, because ultimately you're constantly facing change, and it's okay, and it's scary, but it's okay. And in terms of the skills as well, at least at this point in my career, I find that you should have the basics mastered, right? Be a great writer, be a great communicator, be detail oriented. And those are all things that you're gonna work on. And then the further you get along in your career, I think it's about how are you giving back to others. I find that mentoring others gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. And it's also building relationships is also really a big part of what I do. And oftentimes it's not just, because it's like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this relationship to get to this place or to that. But I'm finding that that's one of the ways that I learn. It's been a while since I was in school, finished B school about, oh my gosh, 2013 or something like that. But but I'm constantly learning, and I'm learning from my peers, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't building relationships, and if I wasn't, to your point, Maddie, all great ideas come from so many different places. So it could be somebody who is 2 years out of school, or somebody who's been with the company 10 years more than I have. So keeping that in mind, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much, Marie. Isabel?
Oh, I definitely want to echo what Maddie and Marie said about soft skills being important, and also about building relationships. I found that, you know, I'm not one of the more, I guess, social people that I'm friends with, and building relationships has definitely been something that has helped me a lot and been kind of hard for me as I continue to like build my confidence in this area. But I'd say that something else that has been really helpful. So in addition to studying Spanish, I also minored in art history, and really having a discerning eye and like looking closely and like practicing that skill so often is something that I've really, graphic design work, and I never learned how to use anything in Adobe beforehand, but now I'm using Illustrator and Adobe Premiere, and all of a sudden I'm like a creative producer. And then I guess going back to that confidence thing, like feeling like your voice should be heard, feeling like your ideas are great. Those are things that I think make a really good communicator. Like if you are able to, yeah, stand behind your ideas and thoughts, because they do matter. Like Maddie said, the junior talent is like, we're here.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And Ariana, thank you for joining us. Just as a little caveat, we will be sending all of this to our registrants afterwards. So no worries if you all have class, because I know that happens. So we're going to continue on. Lauren.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about being at a liberal arts college like Barnard is that you have a constant exposure to areas that fall outside of the ones that you feel most comfortable in. So you might be a total literature person, that's your thing, but you have to take some sort of math or science. And, you know, maybe you're not into the arts, but you've got to take some kind of arts. And it will force you to kind of be in a place that isn't home based to you, but you have to learn it to some degree. And I think that's actually a real strength of being at a liberal arts college, because you always have that exposure to the new, the unfamiliar, and you learn, you know, the Barnard writing program is fantastic. I mean, I learned so much. I remember years ago just about how to write a very concise piece of prose. So I think that you actually have a lot that you may not even realize that you have. You come out of Barnard. I know for myself, I came out of Barnard thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know, I don't have any professional skills yet, but you actually do. I think I'm going to certainly echo what everyone said about soft skills. In addition to the competencies that you build and that you may already have because you've been at Barnard, and of course, because you've been studying in your specific subject area and you've got internships and all sorts of things to take advantage of, it's really great to be, I mean, certainly if you're in communications, to be an organized person, you have to be someone who can plan things out. And if you're not naturally that way, writing things out, keeping lists, keeping deadlines down, because things are very important about when you release what, when, and how you say things and to whom. And so you really need to focus on the organization. That's been really helpful. So my work in the lab, for example, was really helpful for that. Flexibility, having a can-do attitude, that scrappiness is really important. You really want to have this idea that, you know, I'm part of the team, let's see what we can do. And if something doesn't work right away, how can we kind of figure out something around it? You can't solve every problem, but you can try. And building that network around you is really important. I think, like Isabel, I also had to really work on my confidence, and that took several years to really feel like I was in the right field and like I was doing, you know, like I was competent, in other words. And it's sort of, I know people have varying opinions about the fake it till you make it type of approach, but for me it worked really well, where I sort of had this, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be confident about this. I have an idea. I'm going to share it. Let's see what happens. And I think what Maddie was saying too, especially I think in this post-COVID era, and we're not really post, but sort of wherever we are right now, the rule book's kind of been a bit, if it's not been thrown out, it's at least been changed quite a lot, because the things that we, kind of thought we, at least in my field, we could do or we couldn't do have all been upended. We were not, for example, part of promotional work is sending out perusal scores to composers, or to conductors, so that they can consider new works. Well, for a long time, PDFs were out of the question because they could be, reproduced. Well, guess what? When there's no shipping, PDFs become your new thing. And so you come up with something as simple as that. You come up with new ways to solve problems and new ways to communicate things. The turnaround time for events has changed because the format of many events have changed. We've had to, especially if you're someone in fundraising, or if you're, if any kind of communications, you have any kind of organization, you're rethinking everything. And the thing that keeps you sane during that period and keeps you productive is being able to have those soft skills in place, being organized, flexible, having that creativity. Marie, you were talking about the creativity that you need too, developing that aspect of your brain. That's really important. I think now as students, if you can get as many experiences as you can you're in the perfect city for building experience. That will help build those soft skills and complement those, harder competencies and in the subject areas that you're studying in the classroom. So yeah, I think those are all great skills to have.
Thank you so much, everyone. Especially Lauren, Maddie, Marie, Isabel, you all touched on kind of common themes. And one that particularly stood out to me was the idea of like resilience and kind of building your confidence as you go along, especially in this, I don't even know what to call it anymore. Yeah, pandemic, whatever we're in the middle of right now. So I think that's especially crucial, and not only marketing communications, but just in any profession. Like, there is no status quo or standard anymore. And that's both comforting and also can be a little bit daunting. So thank you all for touching on that. So our next question that I have for you all is, how do the challenges and opportunities created by diversity, equity, and inclusion play out in your current roles within marketing and communications? And let's start with Maddie again.
Sure. This is a really good question. And I'm going to give you some background, and then I'm going to be like brutally honest with everyone. So the background first is, as I alluded to, I've specialized in crisis and rapid response communications, what some more conservative folks have called social issues management, like advising companies on how to react to the killing of George Floyd or the January 6th insurrection, public policy like voter suppression laws, for example. Like, I've gone head to head with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies on why they not only need to comment and lead, but also have a proactive strategy and programming that prioritizes D&I. But I also want to address the elephant in the room, which is that I'm white. So does that mean my view doesn't count? No. But when I look around a room, and if I see there's little to no BIPOC representation in the place where these conversations are happening, that's a problem. So I have experience, but I don't have lived experience. And I think that's critical to coming up with policies that actually move the needle and create opportunity and identify clear development paths for people who have been historically underrepresented. The good news, though, is I think that I'm not the only person who's recognized this, and at the risk of, touting corporate America's horn, hear me out on this one. I do think that there is a genuine push from companies to not just make this a check the box, but to really prioritize it in terms of their business strategy. So to me, the opportunity is twofold. Companies are actively bolstering recruitment strategies to ensure more BIPOC representation. And then two, comms people and marketers just have more of this type of work to do. So for better or worse, I think corporations are now expected to walk the talk. And to me, I look at it as more of an opportunity than a challenge. So I don't know if I answered the question wholly, but that's my honest take.
No, thank you so much, Maddie. That was incredibly insightful and helpful. Marie?
No, I I agree that really appreciate your take on that, because I think with the this has always been an issue, obviously, but there's been this sort of reawakening around it with the killing of George Floyd, and the response, the overwhelming response to Black Lives Matters the second time around. Remember, there was a first one that came that didn't get that that type of a response. And what is encouraging, I think, is there is a level of awareness that I don't think we've had before. And as a marketer, as a communicator, I also know that there's a sense that with the pandemic, almost kind of like forcing everyone to stop and take stock. And there's just been an opportunity for collective action and for conversations to take place, and for spaces that were not there to be created for allies to come together and to really say what are and what does action look like. So as a person of color, my take on it has been, having seen all of those black squares on Instagram and all of it, you really couldn't shop for shoes or sugar or milk without seeing a Black Lives Matter slogan on a corporate website. It's all about, well, what happens next? And what I have been encouraged by is, particularly with my peers in the industry, as we have seen D&I become an issue that's not just to the side, sort of like siloed, but how does it integrate in the entire business strategy? How is it part of your recruitment, your retention, as well as how you do business? And so to me, that says it's almost like next gen sustainability. I don't know, when I went to, when I was an undergrad, I was very much like, how can we help? How can business help save the world? And it's like, well, business is not going to save the world, but there are lots of different things that businesses can do to not be part of the problem. So I think we're in a place of reckoning. And as a mother of 3 kids, I feel really proud for that they're living in, because they are seeing change taking place. And yet at the same time, when I speak to their grandparents, my parents, they lived through a similar time. So it's like, how do we show how does the progress keep moving forward? And it's not just kind of like 2 steps forward. So I'm not sure if that fully answered the question. But I think there is room for hope. I truly do. I think that there are some things that happened this time around that didn't before. And hopefully that's caused societal change in a way that it may not have happened if there wasn't a pandemic and there wasn't this collective, everybody just stop in your tracks and take stock of what's going on around you.
Oh, thank you so much, Marie. Isabel?
Sure. So I work at a very culturally specific organization. So this question is actually very interesting to me because, it's a Spanish organization named after the Queen Emeritus of Spain, and it definitely attracts Spaniards in the United States. And so our market, in a way, is very narrow. What I will say, though, is that within our organization, especially in the past couple years, months, we've really focused on language as being something that you have to really look at in a very precise way. In our case specifically, being I'm Venezuelan American working for a Spanish organization. I'm a Spanish speaker. I'm not Spanish. Am I Hispanic? Am I Latina? Am I Latinx, Latine? All of these different terminologies, how you identify yourself, how are you identifying your audience? These sorts of questions are things I think about every single day. And so using inclusive language, but also using specific language, and also understanding that people identify with different things or may not identify with them at all. So for me, like this question about diversity, equity, inclusion, in terms of like returning diverse talent in our organization, you know, we are a very small organization that has a lot of people who only like focus specifically on Spain's arts and culture. And I think that I wish that our organization could do more to include other voices in that. But it's also one, a small organization, and two, a very specific field. And I think relates to people's interests. But I think that the way that we communicate about ourselves from internally can potentially help create some sense of inclusion, and that doesn't necessarily exist maybe societally. I don't know if I am explaining myself well, but yeah, we are small but trying to be as inclusive as possible. And so
Thank you so much, Isabel. Yeah, I'm myself in a Latina, I'm Puerto Rican, and I often have very similar feelings in terms of how we can represent everyone who relates to these kind of terms and how we can respect what they want to be referred to as, because that covers the entire spectrum. So I find it especially interesting considering the organization you work for. That dynamic can be especially difficult, or at least jarring to navigate. So thank you for that. You explained yourself very well. Lauren.
Yeah, so, you know, classical music, which is the field that I'm in, has had a real sort of reckoning, awakening, particularly, I'd say, heightened over the last 5 years, and in the last year in particular. You know, I think the trend has been that there's increasingly greater diversity among composers, I'd say over the last 10 years. So we see a lot more BIPOC composers writing major works being commissioned. But it, you know, there's still more to be done, of course, and on so many levels. So, you know, by the time a composer comes to a publisher, like a major international publisher, like Schott or like Boozy or Schirmer, any of the big ones, they've gone through years and years and years and years and years of training as a musician, and then advanced training as a composer, so most of them start as instrumentalists or vocalists, and then they you know, study composition, and then they go to conservatory, and then they, you know, do certain residencies, and there's a whole structure in place that gets someone who's a composer from point A to point B. And so by the time we see composers, they're sort of they're formed, you know. And so a lot of us on that end have been thinking about, you know, a sort of definitely inclusivity. So what can we do where we are? The great news is that there's a ton of composers from every background you can imagine who are writing incredible music. And part of the issue, I think, is not that they're not there, is that we have to be looking for them. It's part of our job as programmers, as publishers, as anybody who's working in that field, to not just go to the old standbys, okay, well, they graduated from this conservatory, or this is where I'll be looking, or I'll go to Alice Tully Hall or Carnegie Hall, or to hear the best new voices. But there's a lot of work being done in lots of spaces. So if you're in a city like New York, if you're in London, if you're in major cities especially, but even if you're not, we've got, you know, plenty of communication and material via the internet. We need to be listening to different voices all the time. And that's something that I do with my team. So we have a program called Project Shot New York. So when you work with a publisher, it's almost like a marriage, right? We publish the music, so we own the music that our composers write, but in turn, we get them new commissions. So they earn a living by their writing, and we represent their works. And it's really like we have to be completely. It is like a marriage. We have to trust each other completely, because without the music, we have nothing to promote and to work with. And of course, without the promotion, there's fewer commissions and fewer opportunities to earn a living as a composer. And so with that being said, we have a program called Project Shot New York, which represents the music of younger emerging composers. And what's lovely about that roster is that without having to try very much, the roster is 50% male, 50% female. We have composers from every background represented, and it's because these wonderful composers exist, and we're looking for them. I think we need to continue to do that in all elements of the of the establishments, so the conservatories, the major opera and symphonies, and two, I think once we start doing that, we also need to think about education, and think about how do we get the young people the resources and opportunities that they need, both at the elementary level. As a mother of two children who play music, and they've had every exposure to it, but let's get that as part of the norm, and because you never know where the next wonderful composer artist is coming from, and to make more opportunities more equitable. So what's been great is not just from publishing stance, but our colleagues who have ensembles, their own residency programs. They've done away with fees to apply. They've done away with a lot of tuition. They've written more grants to get more funding because they've come to understand that the world is very wide, and even if we're with the best of intentions looking at the field of applicants we have before us, if there are people who can't even apply, then we're missing them. And so it's really important, I think, to think about, okay, we think we're doing the right thing, but are we missing anything? Is there something we haven't thought of? We're used to looking at all the same places. Are we missing places where we could be looking? And one of my a woman I've worked with several times, she's a composer named Kamala Sankaram. I'm so in awe of her music. She's just incredible. She combines Western classical music with like Hindustani music, and she's just brilliant. And I interviewed her once about her work with an opera company, and she was saying that she's delighted to take on this new role because it gives that company a whole access to other performers and other composers and other creators who work in a different field, not in classical music proper, but in like Hindustani music or in certain like hybrid types of music. And that creates, dialogue between them and increases the opportunities really for everybody. So I think, it's those sorts of networks and creations we have to be constantly thinking about in all of the arts. I think in general, where are the spaces that we're missing and who are we unintentionally leaving out? I do agree. I think lots of companies, and certainly most arts companies that I know, are trying to do the right thing and increasingly having to do the right thing because they're seeing it right there. Okay, there's injustice. We need to fix it. But it's also just having that second thought of what am I leaving out? And that's what we try to do. What I personally try to do, and I think what most companies are thinking of.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you, everyone. So being cognizant of the time, I do want to leave space for Q&A. So students, if you have questions that you'd like to pose to our alumni that are joining us today, feel free to put it in the chat or start thinking of it. We're going to head into this next question, and then we'll have Q&A after. So you can start thinking about what you want to ask. And our next question is, how have your visible and invisible identities played out in your career thus far based on your own experiences? And Maddie, we'll start with you again.
Great. I think this is another excellent question, and I'm going to use it as an opportunity to talk about my experience just being a woman in the workplace. I mentioned that I started my career in government. What I don't think I did mention, however, is that I did work in the Cuomo administration. For anyone who's been following the news lately, you're probably aware that there was a toxic environment for women. To be clear, for a variety of reasons, the former governor did not sexually harass me personally. However, I did experience an incredibly toxic environment for women, which was a big reason I ended up leaving public service, unfortunately. I wish I could tell the undergrads on the call today that it gets easier on the private side, but I don't know that it really does. Unfortunately, I've learned to some degree that you have to navigate this as a woman. And it's really emotionally draining in a way your male counterparts maybe won't really be able to appreciate. And so I left the Cuomo administration to work at a firm with a really flat structure, a very strong female CEO, which is really rare in M&A. But unfortunately, a culture that didn't really recognize the burden of being a woman in the workplace. So the real reason I left my last job was a reality I had to face following a conversation with my former boss. So my former boss is a partner at the firm. He's actually a man I really admire and consider to be a professional mentor. He actually struck up a conversation with me about work-life balance, given my now husband was finishing his MBA and heading back into the world of consulting. So in that conversation, I said, Scott, I'm getting married. I'm approaching my 30s. I want to have a family. And I've never seen anyone in mid-management, meaning like director or managing director, have a child that wasn't a man. And ultimately, there's an expiry date on my tenure here. And his answer, remember, he's a middle-aged white man. He said, if my wife wasn't a stay-at-home mother, I couldn't keep this job. That sucked. But it also forced me to reevaluate where my career was going and realize that I didn't need to work a 24/7 job, climb a ladder I wasn't even interested in climbing. So in the end, I changed jobs, and I did it because I believe you should be your fully formed self, a human first, an employee second, maybe even third, fourth. And my new company, like, that's what it's all about. And I tell these stories not to scare anyone on the call. I just wanted to be honest with you, because as much as the workforce has changed, I think a lot of my fellow panelists touched on this today. These experiences aren't uncommon still. And it's why I feel so passionately that you should always trust your instincts and bet on yourself and be the best advocate for you. So again, it can be scary in the moment, but with the help of a good support system, you can handle way more than you think.
Thank you so much, Maddie, for that. Marie?
Amen, sister. That support system is so key. I mean, to share my experience, unapologetically Black woman in corporate workspace. I went to business school when I was 3 months postpartum. So I had a little baby. And the person who was able to make it possible for me to do that was my husband, who was like, yep, I'm going to be the primary parent while you are in classes full time, and you got to do what you got to do. And we're a team. So for me, what I've learned about navigating the different identities is that I personally have not been able to do it all at once, all the time. I had so many nights where I felt so guilty being in school and having this little one and feeling like I'm missing a lot of his life. And I would have, my husband basically kind of have to pull me back off the edge of the ledge and be like, it's okay. Remember why you're doing this and what example you're setting. And everything worked out well. I actually ended up graduating with a 2-month-old. So I had his brother the year that I graduated. But all that to say, it wasn't easy. And as a mom, I know that there were a lot of times where I felt like this space is not made for me. This space that I'm in was not created with somebody like me in mind. And so I'm going to have to create and come up with resources in order to make it happen. The only thing I never really was on the table was to quit. So I think that is part of it. And also knowing that I can't say that I did it by myself. So that support system is key.
Thank you, Marie. That was inspiring. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm often thinking about that and the space that I have for me. So thank you so much for sharing that. Isabel.
Yeah, well, I think that you, or I at least, bring myself and every single part of myself to every space that I inhabit. Every part of my identity, my race and ethnicity, my, where I grew up, what languages I speak, my sexual orientation, everything. It's something that I think you can't leave it behind. There are certain things that are visible, there are certain things that are invisible, but I think that every single place that I've ever worked, I've brought my full self. Maybe some things I never discussed with coworkers, plenty of things actually. But yeah, I think that in terms of how it's played out in my career, I think it has changed what sorts of fields I've been more interested in joining, what types of and sizes of organizations I have applied for positions, just because I know I will personally feel more comfortable in situations, I will say in the arts especially, and I've noticed there in the roles that I've had, I've been in a lot of worked in a lot of organizations where there are primarily women, and that has been something that was really comforting to me. I worked at Sesame Workshop, the like major company for Sesame Street, as an intern once, and seeing so many women and having like executives as women, like that was very, I don't know, it made me feel like I belonged. And yeah, so I know there are like, I know that's just one facet of who I am, but I think it has shaped how I have approached different organizations, and also, yeah, how perhaps my coworkers have approached me.
Thank you, Isabel. Lauren?
Yeah, I think we could probably have a whole panel about the work-life balance and parenting and family building and all the sorts of things. I took 5 years off from full-time work. I'm 35 now. I took off between about 26, 27 to 31, 32. And when I was coming back into the workforce, one of the biggest things that I was thinking of was, how am I going to balance what I need to balance, my family life and my work life. And I want to do a great job at work, but I also have these other responsibilities and things that are very dear to me. And it's finding the kind of position and situation that works for you. Maria, I love what you said about not being able to do it all at once. When my kids were really small and I was, in my late 20s, and I was thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to, get anything done? And because they needed me full time. And it was that sort of thing. Like I never thought you could balance it, but then I started doing some things, and then I started realizing, okay, I can do some things. And then they got older, and then they like went to nursery school. Then you have more time, and then you do more things, and you can do so many things. Maybe not all at once, but balancing that pressure that you can put on yourself. And I know, as Barnard women, many of us are sort of high achievers, and we want to do everything. And we really want to focus on career and doing a great job. But we also have other things outside of the career that we really want to accomplish too. And it's having some grace with yourself in the balance. I'm very fortunate. My team is amazing. I work primarily with 3 men who are the biggest feminists and cheerleaders, and I mean, most flexible individuals. So, family always comes first. I was working hybrid before COVID, and many of us were. It's that sort of environment. And so I say this to say that, when you are looking for jobs in the future and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, I think part of that process is also knowing yourself. Like Maddie, you had the idea of like, this is coming up, this is coming down the pike. This is where I am now, but in a few years, this is where I may be. And how am I going to balance it all? Things may need to change. And so you constantly have to reevaluate that and show yourself kindness too, because it's okay to want lots of different things. We all as humans have to figure out the balance. My husband, does as well, as much as I do. I mean, I've had to think about it more, of course, as the person that's carried the children, but he also is a super involved parent and has had to decide, am I going to take this job that takes, a lot of travel out of me? And so those are things, conversations that you have. And if you can really be upfront with yourself too, because creating a support system is very important. But don't hide the things from the people around you that want to support you by saying, I can do it, and but maybe reach out for help when you need it. I know for me, that's always the thing. I need to ask for more help. But it's having that grace on yourself and being forthcoming with what your needs are, and understanding that you can do so much, even if it's not everything all at once. There's still time, and things always do change from your 20s to your 30s and beyond. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing. We're quickly approaching the end of our session. So I want to open the floor up for any questions from students, and then we'll wrap things up. So any questions for our alumna for today?
Yeah, I do have a question. My name is Maya. Thank you all for being here. It's really nice to meet you and hear your stories. But I wanted to go back to something that Maddie, you had said earlier in the session, and I would also love to hear everybody else's different perspectives on this. That you had said that the job you're in now, you had acquired basically by talking to your current boss and basically like asking for a job. And in a real literal way, I'm just wondering like what that conversation was like. What was there like a lead up to it where you had a relationship beforehand? And then from anybody else, just wondering, like, if you were in that position of, being the CMO or whatever your position is that you might be hiring someone, what would you like to see someone do in that kind of situation?
Yeah, great question. And also a good segue from what we were just talking about, because it really comes down to my support system. So I was in client services at my former job. So I had a bunch of different clients, like 35 active at once, which I don't recommend to anyone. One of my clients is my current job today, TCG player. So I developed a relationship, also back to relationship building with the CEO. I realized through my interactions with him that the culture was set from the top down. So I already loved what he was doing. They brought on a CMO who's my boss now. So I got to know him. And I realized in my conversations, like with my family, the only thing that I kept talking about positively in my job was the work I was doing for this weird company that does Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. And my husband was a really big advocate for this, but he's like, you have to tell them, like, if you love to work for this company, you need to let them know. And like, it's really risky. I'm not going to lie to you. Client services, it's not really a big like thing that was supported by my former employer, but I just like put a meeting on his calendar on a Zoom. I was like, I got to talk to you about something. And I said, I really love your company. I know you're hiring like crazy. I don't know if you're looking for someone with my skill set, but I wanted to let you know I'm interested if you are, and like just put it on him. And I got the best reaction I could have hoped for. Like I got really lucky. He was like, I'm so flattered. Like you got to work with our company. Like you've looked under the hood, and like for you to want to trust us with your career is pretty major. So it worked out for me. And he brings it up to this day about like just having a good company with strong core values, attracting the best possible talent. But I'm not going to lie to you. I was scared shitless. I was like, is this okay? I don't know if it's okay. And then the conversations that followed with my former employer were awkward, but people kind of get it. And like to speak to from my CMO's experience, because that's my boss, he was like, this is the most amazing thing that could have ever happened. It's so hard to find good talent that wants to grow and with the company and build it. And he was like actually relieved.
Maddie, I think you need to lead a course on like just the corporate confidence building, and I could definitely learn so much from you.
Or being really, really, really burnt out and tired and just like not having the energy to care beyond that.
I mean, sometimes that's what it takes, right? And you realize, I think too, getting the relationship building part of it is really important. But I think too that inner work comes first. You came to the point where you were insightful about what you needed and how you were feeling. And sometimes I feel like in any type of work, we get so used to doing the work that we forget to pull back and think about, like, how do I feel? Am I in balance at all? And when I interviewed for my current position, the vibe was just so good. It's like that inner trust. You need to trust yourself too, because where you work is so important. It's such a big part of your life, at least 40 hours a week, plus or minus whatever, depending on what kind of career you're in. And in communications, it can be many more hours. It's a big part of your life, and it's hard sometimes to compartmentalize. And so it's really important for mental health, for your physical health, for everything, to make sure that, does it feel like it's a good fit? And if it doesn't, to be honest about that. And there's no shame in saying, you know what, this is not working. Let me look for something else. And then having the guts to go for it. I mean, that's great. That's really fantastic.
What's really interesting though? It was a professor I had at Barnard who said this to me. He wasn't the best professor I've ever had. He was at some point like one of my counselors, but he said, don't suffer in silence. Because if you suffer in silence, no one will know. And it's just stuck with me my whole life. And look, I'm coming to you today on the other side in this new job that I'm really enjoying, but I'm not going to lie, especially to the undergrads on the call. Like, I got to a very, very, very dark place, and I let myself work like that for way longer than I should have. So follow Lauren's advice the second that you realize this isn't working, and that's okay, and make that change, because like having that courage early on in your career, I think is just going to set you on a better path quicker.
Yeah, and you deserve it. You deserve to have a sense of peace and fulfillment while you do the work. It's really important to take care of yourselves as well, and to be your own best advocate. Most people, I think, I'm a very hopeful person. I think most people are good people, and they really do want to work with you. They really do want to, they want the best people there, and they want people that are happy there, and they don't want people to suffer. And so it's really important, I think, too, that you let your needs be known. As awkward or hard as that is sometimes.
Thank you so much. I see Stella has a question, but also for our alumna. I know we're over the time, so thank you for still staying on, but if you have to run somewhere, that is totally okay. But Stella, what is your question?
So I have a question for Maddie. I'm a political science major, and I know you worked in public policy for the Perlman administration, and I'm wondering what kind of skills carried over when you decided to move to TCG Player, and I mean, what was like most different in that, and did you expect it?
Yeah, I actually believe that everyone should work in public service. Like, this is my personal thing, at least at some point in their career. Like, it just gives you a really different lens through which to view the world. Like, public-private partnerships is really cool. There's a ton of relationship management that goes into that. Like, it let me get scrappy super early on. The biggest thing that I take with me from that experience, and I worked on Governor Cuomo's like campaigns even before that, like as an unpaid volunteer. I've been like in that world for a long time. It taught me how to navigate really hard personalities. And I'm not saying that in my job today, I'm doing that every day. My last job, I sure was. I was dealing with C-suite level executives at publicly traded companies. So really tough personalities with big egos, and it teaches you just how to deal with it. Like, I don't want to lie to you guys. You may be confronted with things that like you don't like and that are uncomfortable, but part of being professional is also recognizing it, one, but then like how do you deal with it? Like, how do you make that interaction the most productive for you and not let it hold you back or stifle your development? So that's something that I carry into what I do at TCG Player. And I'm really fortunate that my company is super weird and it's full of a bunch of geeks that are really nice. So I don't have to do it a ton, but it's full of people who wear that identity on their sleeve. And I think there's value in that, knowing how to approach people and understanding where they're coming from in the conversation too. So back to my plug on soft skills.
Great. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I want to
This is just like,
thing. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, if I don't mind if you want to like give out my contact information or whatever, if folks like have questions, and I'm always happy to chat with undergrads. It actually like gives me a lot of joy. So if there's a way to get it out, please feel free to reach out.
Yes, if you all are comfortable sharing your contact information, I'll follow up, but you all will be receiving an email with the recording, and we can include contact information in there as well. So optional, but you can totally feel free to do that. And great, Maya, we covered that. Awesome. So any last minute questions? Okay, well, thank you so much again, Isabel, Marie, Lauren, Maddie. This was wonderful. I had a lot of fun talking with you all and hearing your insights. It was so definitely appreciative, and I think students got a lot from it. So thank you. Keep in touch for the students. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck on the rest of your midterms. Bye.
Bye,
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank
So
you.
much for inviting me. Bye.